All right, today we're diving deep into a fascinating mystery from ancient history. We're talking about a civilization that was, for centuries, hiding in plain sight. A phantom power that helped shape the Bronze Age world, and they were called the Luwians. So I want you to picture the scene. It's around 1200 BCE. The great empires of the Eastern Mediterranean. We're talking Egypt, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans in Greece. They're all linked up in these huge trade networks. It's basically the world's first truly globalized society. And then, poof. In just a few decades, the whole thing comes crashing down. Palaces get torched, cities are abandoned, entire writing systems just vanish. We call this the Late Bronze Age collapse. For generations, historians have been trying to piece together exactly what happened. We know a lot about the big empires that fell and the ones that barely scraped by. But what if there was another major player in all this drama? A group whose role we've only just started to understand.
To find them, our investigation is going to take us to ancient Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. Now, this rugged, resource-rich land was home to the famous Hittite Empire. But here's the thing, they weren't alone. Lurking in the background of their own records, and then rising from the ashes of their collapse, was this other group, the Luwians.
So who were they exactly? Well, the first thing you have to get your head around is that Luwian isn't the name of a single unified empire. Nope. Instead, it's more of a catch-all term for a bunch of different peoples scattered all across western and southern Anatolia who all happen to speak a similar language. So don't think of a single country, think of a collection of allied kingdoms sharing a culture.
Let's break that down a bit. So they were neighbors with the Hittites, and yeah, they were part of the same big language family, but their own language was really distinct. For centuries, they kind of lived in the shadow of the Hittite Empire. Sometimes they were allies, sometimes they were bitter rivals. But their real moment in the sun, that came after the Hittites collapsed. That's when they stepped out of the shadows and became major players in the new Iron Age.
For the longest time, the Luwians were basically historical ghosts. We knew they existed, sure, but we couldn't really wrap our minds around their scale or how important they were. The key that finally unlocked their world wasn't some buried treasure or magnificent palace. It was the bits and pieces of their language. And that's a fascinating question, isn't it? I mean, how can some dusty old clay tablets and carvings on a rock face completely rewrite history? Well, for the Luwians, their language is one of the most powerful clues we have. It's the tool that lets scholars finally start drawing them back onto the map of the ancient world. And what's amazing is that the Luwian language survived in two totally different forms. First, there's cuneiform Luwian. This was written on clay tablets, and we find it in the Hittite archives. Think of this as their private language, used for all the boring administrative stuff, the day-to-day business that really shows you how a state works. But then you have hieroglyphic Luwian. This was their public face. This was carved into giant stone monuments for everyone to see. These were the big, bold proclamations of kings, designed to scream, "We are powerful and last forever." So, once scholars could piece together these two different types of writing, they could finally do something incredible. They could identify Luwian kingdoms, trace their influence, and really understand their political power. The language itself literally allowed us to redraw the map of the ancient world. It's just amazing. But look, language is only one part of the story. To really understand the Luwians, we have to get our boots on the ground, so to speak, and look at what they physically left behind. We have to look at the archaeology. And the physical evidence is just as compelling, let me tell you. All across Western Anatolia, you find the ruins of these massive, fortified citadels. They're perched on hills, totally dominating the landscape, overlooking fertile plains and strategic mountain passes. And their location was no accident, right? These guys were smart. They were perfectly positioned to control the vital trade routes and, crucially, the access to precious metals like tin and copper, the absolute lifeblood of the Bronze Age. You combine that with those big monumental inscriptions we find at these sites, and the picture becomes crystal clear. These were the power centers of confident, highly organized Luwian states. The main takeaway from all this archaeology is just undeniable.
The Luwians weren't just passively hanging out on the land. No way. Through their strategic citadels and their chokehold on resources, they were a dominant force. They were the ones connecting mainland Anatolia to the Aegean Sea and all the way to the civilizations in the Levant. Which brings us all the way back to the Great Collapse. If the Luwians were this powerful and this organized, then what was their role in the biggest geopolitical event of their time? Well, this is where a huge debate is still unfolding among scholars today. When it comes to the collapse, scholars are basically in two main camps. On one side, you've got the theory that the Luwian states were actually a destabilizing force, that their expansion and their constant competition for resources is part of what brought the mighty Hittite Empire to its knees. But on the other side, you have a totally different view. This camp sees the Luwians as savvy survivors, not destroyers, but opportunists who are just in a better position to adapt to a changing world and step up as the new regional powers. So which is it? The truth is, we don't have the final answer yet. As this quote points out, this is living history. It's not a closed book. Every new inscription we find, every new targeted excavation, it adds another piece to the puzzle. Our understanding of the Luwians is literally evolving as we speak.
So, after all this, why should we care? Why does a long-lost group of Anatolian kingdoms actually matter to us today? What's their real legacy?
Well, the Luwian legacy is actually huge. First off, their story is a powerful reminder that history is never really finished. Entire civilizations can be brought back from the brink of obscurity with some careful detective work. Second, their existence forces us to completely rethink one of the most pivotal moments in the past. You simply cannot tell the story of the Bronze Age collapse anymore without talking about them. And finally, they fundamentally reshape our map of the ancient world. They add a crucial, missing piece to a puzzle we thought we had already solved. And that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. The Luwians were a major force. They controlled huge territories, vast resources, and yet they were a complete phantom in our history books for centuries. It just makes you wonder, who else is out there, still waiting to be rediscovered?